I'm going to be talking about the okcupid survey that was some time ago. I have a link to the actual discussion, but one of the main parts that was pulled out that I heard that received a lot of attention was women rated 80% of men as unattractive on the site, basically pursuing only 20%. And of course, we had the usual reasons that women marry across and up, but that was a lot higher than everyone expected, and it wasn't, of course, the same for the men. Men generally had kind of an even distribution, around 50% of women that they found attractive. And I talked about this with my wife, and it was actually a pretty long discussion that we had, probably 30, 45 minutes, maybe even up to an hour, and it went back and forth a whole lot while we were talking about things and trying to sort it out. So I'm kind of trying to give a recap of the whole discussion, so some parts may be missing, and I apologize if it seems a bit incomplete. One of the things that my wife mentioned was that women have a lot more things that they use when they're selecting a mate. One of the things specifically that she said is how a person, like a man, smiles. And she didn't mean like in a picture or something, but when you see them in person, how they smile. Of course, how they smell. If you've listened to any sort of interview about women, what they prefer in a man, the list goes on and on and on. It's almost like unlimited, the things that they would list. Generally, the things I think that men would list is not that long. It's probably 4 or 5 things for most guys. It's not that much. And one of the things she mentioned was that online dating is more geared to visual, which is more how men interpret women, what they mainly base their decisions on for mating. Whereas with women, that's not the same. They don't actually just base it on the visuals, which of course does make sense in a large degree because, you always see a rich, older, very much older man with a younger woman, and that's not uncommon, and nobody really thinks odd of that. But you would think odd of it if it was the other way around in some ways. So they have a whole toolkit that they use, a whole different checklist or things that each woman uses to evaluate a man, and those are much longer and larger than a man would evaluate a woman. And because of that, online dating restricts a woman's tools that she has, so she overcorrects or overuses the limited tools that she does have, accounting a bit more for that disparity of 80% of men is actually rated as unattractive. Another thing that I think plays a bit of a part into it is that we do know that women have more highs and lows. And I forget the technical term. I don't remember if it's affect, but you also see that because there's more women diagnosed with depression, mood disorders. So they experience the highs and the lows a lot more than men do. Men tend to be a little bit more even keel. And they tend to be more anxious, women, and they also tend to be more risk adverse, which isn't uncommon given our evolutionary past as hunters and gatherers for so long, that women that chose to do risks that didn't really pay off for them. They didn't get more of a chance to mate because of that. But with men, of course, if you took a risk, there was the potential that you would have the chance to mate and pass off your genes. So men tend to be more risk prone, women risk averse, and that's supported in pretty evolutionary concepts. Of course, not all. I don't want to paint everyone with 100% brush. There always are the exceptions, but we're kind of talking in generalities here because we're talking about a large pool of people. And again, I would state that you don't want to ever take a large statistical sample and apply it to one person. You're using your statistics incorrectly if you do that. We're looking at this whole sample, and I'm just trying to make sense of this disparity because, of course, a lot of people also online that I saw would say at the time that the disparity was, women are gold diggers, women are, they're crazy, they're trying to just go for the top, even though they clearly aren't even supposed to be there. And I think once we dig into this that women experience the highs and the lows, they tend to be more anxious and risk adverse. Now you restrict their tool usage in the mating, and so are they hedging their bets on a greater outcome? It's kind of like if you're not familiar with a poker game, how it's played, maybe it's a different rule set than you're used to, and it's a little bit more, restricts you quite a bit. You just bet everything on one hand and hope to win. You think you have a decent hand here you're looking at, and so you say, well, this is probably the best it's going to get, and so you just bet everything on it. And I wonder if that's not what we're seeing more with those sort of statistics, and at least with the okcupid stuff, that women are over betting because they've restricted their tool usage. Obviously, with the online, it's only going to be pretty much visual. They're not going to be able to smell someone online and all the other things that go along with that. So that's what's accounting for that greater disparity, that women are overusing those tools that they have, which may not even be incorrect necessarily. I'm not applying a judgment value to it. I'm just trying to figure out why that's going on. And I wasn't sufficiently happy with the women marry across and up, and women are, pursuing the higher status, even though if they can't get them, because it didn't make sense, because they don't necessarily do that even in real life. See, that's the problem, is there is something different about the online sample. And I do think my wife hit on something, that with the restricted tool usage, and then with the highs and lows that women experience, they have more anxiety overall, and they tend to be risk adverse, that kind of makes sense that they would kind of bet all on one big payoff, so to speak, under those circumstances. And I don't know if there's any other research or studies that support that. So if you have anything, I would appreciate a link to it below. That would be much appreciated. Anything that would form, either it's for or against, or just to inform the situation more. Another example I give of women, because I don't think anxious is quite the right word that I'm using, but I'm not sure how else to say this, is the example I gave my wife was that, if you wake up one day and you go to your fridge, and there's only eggs in there, so you can only have eggs to eat that day, that's not a big problem for a guy. You'd be like, okay, it's eggs, right? Not a big deal. But if a woman were to go to her fridge and all she saw were eggs in there, that's all she had to eat, she would be pissed. Just flat out. I mean, that would not make a woman happy. And again, you see that restricted tools, like even if she didn't want to eat them, maybe she would just eat eggs anyways that day. But just the restricted tools tend to make her anxious, angry, afraid. I'm not sure exactly on the terminology to use there, but unsettled at the very least. And because of that, you see, people, when they're unsettled, often do not make rational choices. They're kind of panicked. And in that way, you see that overcorrection for women rating 80% of men as unattractive as a bit of a panic, I guess. A low-key panic, obviously, not maybe even consciously aware of it, but they don't have their full usage to select their mate from. So I do invite discussion. If you have anything to add or anything to rebut, or like I said, just inform more, I would appreciate it. So include anything like you have that below, and I'll try to get back to you and answer you. Thank you.